afternoon and welcome to IBA News this Sunday, the 4th of December. I'm Elon Aslan-Levy and we're live from Jerusalem. The state will seek an extension on the court-ordered deadline to demolish Amona, but there is still no political agreement on a comprehensive solution. Speaking at today's cabinet meeting, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the government is working around the clock to find a responsible solution, which would protect the settlement enterprise alongside the authority of the Supreme Court. His comments came after the failure of his last-minute meeting with Education Minister Bennett, who is pushing the regulation bill to retroactively legalize thousands of homes built on private Palestinian land in the West Bank, including the illegal outpost of Amona, which is slated for demolition on the 25th of December. The Kulanu party is refusing to vote for the bill unless Bennett removes the clause protecting Amona specifically, for fear it would undermine the High Court, which has already ordered the demolition of the illegal outpost, and Kulanu's vote with the opposition would deny the government a majority. The Security Cabinet is set to vote on the proposed bill tomorrow after it passed its first reading in the Knesset last month. Meanwhile, residents of Amona have vowed to block the court-ordered demolition with their bodies, and police have arrested 2 minors on suspicion of inciting insubordination for urging soldiers to refuse orders to evacuate the outpost. If elections were held today, Yesh Atid and the Likud would tie with 25 seats apiece. That's according to the latest Channel 2 poll, in which the Zionist Union would collapse from 24 seats to just 10. The third largest party would remain the joint list with 13 seats, and the Jewish Home would recover to 11. Yisrael Beitenu would rise to 9 seats, while Kulanu, Meretz, Shas and United Torah Judaism would win 7 seats apiece. The numbers represent the same net total of seats for the parties in the present coalition, but confirm the emergence of Yesh Atid as the biggest challenge to that configuration. Buoyed by the polling data, Yesh Atid proposed a bill today to dissolve the Knesset and hold early elections. Attorneys for the Prime Minister's wife, Sarah Netanyahu, are demanding the Attorney General Avichai Mandelblit launch a probe into anti-fraud unit Lahav 433, after partial transcripts from the police questioning of Mrs. Netanyahu were leaked to Channel 2. Mrs. Netanyahu was questioned by police for close to 12 hours on Thursday on suspicion of fraud relating to bookkeeping in the Prime Minister's residence. In his letter, attorney Yossi Cohen described the transcripts as forged, saying they represent a malicious distortion of Mrs. Netanyahu's words and create a false and deceptive picture of the investigation. They further charged that the report was based on a criminal leak originating in the investigating authorities and represents a fabrication of evidence. The Jerusalem prosecutor will now decide whether to press charges against Mrs. Netanyahu. IDF Chief of Staff Gadi Eisenkot has vowed zero tolerance for sexual abuse in the army, vowing that the IDF will not hesitate to take decisive action even against high-ranking officers. Eisenkot made the comments in a letter to commanders as Brigadier General Ofek Buchris finalizes a plea deal with military prosecutors over 16 counts of sexual offenses against female subordinates, including 3 counts of rape. Buchris admitted last week to certain offenses in exchange for having charges of rape and sexual assault dropped. If the plea deal is accepted, Buchris will be demoted a rank and will not serve jail time, receiving instead a suspended sentence. Soldiers have been reacting with anger and ridicule to the news, sharing stories online of far more serious punishments they received for lesser offences with the hashtag #MoreThanBullets. Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman has expressed hope that Israel will reach a common vision with the incoming Trump administration on the future of the Middle East. Speaking at the Saban Forum in Washington, D.C., Lieberman urged America to remain active in the region and said it was crucial to move forward with more sanctions against Iran in light of the Islamic Republic's development of ballistic missiles, human rights abuses, and activities in Syria. Echoing his earlier suggestion that Israel could freeze construction in isolated settlements in exchange for U.S. support for building in the blocks, Lieberman further stressed the importance of coordinating policy with the 45th president.
My proposal is to wait for the new administration and to create, together with the new administration, a common policy. Not, without any surprise and not to create some facts, but to wait and to to discuss with the next administration our policy and our visions. I think it's clear for us, for me at least, that key to the future of the settlements it's understandings with United States, not only our desire. We're not in a vacuum. And I think the last 8 years, it was a huge problem. It was one of the main points of disagreements between us and the current administration.
A somewhat different view now from Jewish-American writer, critic and magazine editor Leon Wieseltier, who believes Israel is not likely to see a significant change in foreign policy in a Trump White House. In an interview with Israel Television's Yaakov Achimeir during a visit to Israel, Wieseltier spoke about the Israel-US alliance.
If the Israeli right now thinks that because Trump has been elected, they can establish as many outposts as they want, because everything's going to be fine, I think they're wrong. There has been a consistency in American policy towards Israel in the territories since Nixon, which means a negotiated solution, territories for peace, some kind that you can argue about, Jerusalem, some sort of arrangement, you can argue about the arrangement. Israel cannot annex the West Bank with American approval. I think there will be these consistencies. And Trump is not an interventionist. He is not going to pursue an activist foreign policy.
Maybe the relationship between Mr. Netanyahu and Mr. Trump will be better than the relationship with the previous president.
Well, it has to be better. No relationship between any Israeli prime minister and any American president has ever been worse than the relationship between Netanyahu and Obama, and they were both significantly to blame. And, you know, my own view always was that that as soon as both Obama and Netanyahu would disappear from the scene, U.S.-American relations would improve overnight, because the soap opera would end. The Netanyahu-Obama soap opera would end.
I know that you don't agree with the policies of Mr. Netanyahu, but there is one issue that you find yourself in agreement with Mr. Netanyahu, the nuclear deal with Iran.
The Iran deal was a terrible deal. I thought that it was a terrible deal because it didn't treat the problem that it was supposed to treat. It postponed the problem. I wouldn't sell a house the way we negotiated, the way the United States negotiated that deal, and I don't think the deal solves the problem at all. It postpones the solution to the problem.
Deep in your heart, you and your circle of friends, what do you think about Mr. Trump?
I'm sickened. I'm embarrassed for my country that such a man is president. I think that the fact that all the expressions of racism and misogyny and nativism and xenophobia and anti-Semitism, that all these expressions in the Trump campaign did not prevent him from winning, is a disgrace for the United States. That's what I think. If you ask me, what do we do now? We have to live with the reality and see how to oppose him and see if something constructive can come out of this. But as a moral matter and as a historical matter, I think it is a national disgrace. He ran the ugliest campaign I have ever seen in my lifetime. Not ugly only because of what he said about Hillary Clinton, because politics can get ugly. Ugly because of what he said about millions of Americans. Millions of Americans. Immigrants, refugees, Mexicans, Hispanics, African Americans, physically disadvantaged people, women. It was, after what he that tape, the fact that none of this prevented him from being elected to the presidency of the United States is a national disgrace, as far as I'm concerned.
Promising a prompt response, Iran has slammed the US Senate's decision to renew the Iran Sanctions Act, insisting the extension violates the nuclear agreement with 6 world powers and the Islamic Republic. Responding to the US Senate vote with 99 senators in favor and none against, Tehran's foreign ministry spokesman urged President Obama to use his presidential authority to prevent the enforcement of the act. The president must now sign the bill for it to become law, but could still attempt to veto it. Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif said that the Senate vote proves that Washington cannot be relied upon to act on its commitments, but American officials maintain this set of sanctions was not covered by the commitment to sanctions relief in the nuclear agreement.
We need to send a signal to Iran that the United States, while meeting its obligations under the JCPOA, will continue to respond to other threatening and dangerous activities the Iranian regime is taking. Since the nuclear agreement came into force, Iran has continued its efforts to destabilize the region and increase its power through proxy and terrorist networks. Since we signed the nuclear agreement with Iran, Iran has been testing the agreement, testing our resolve, and quite literally testing long-range ballistic missiles.
A fatal day on the nation's roads. 2 men and a woman in their 30s were killed after midnight in a collision between 2 vehicles along Road 79 in the Lower Galilee near Moshav Tzipori. 2 others, including a 3-year-old toddler, were seriously injured and 3 others suffered light injuries. The wounded were evacuated by helicopter to hospitals in Haifa and Nazareth. Police closed Route 79 to traffic in both directions for several hours and launched an investigation. Over the past decade, a total of 48 people were killed on this very same road in separate accidents. The Transport Ministry had recently published a tender to repair the stretch of the road on which the accident happened. Legendary Israeli Air Force pilot Ran Peker was laid to rest a short time ago at the Kfar Vitkin cemetery. Peker passed away yesterday at the age of 80 after suffering from a severe illness. He served as an Air Force pilot for nearly 30 years, starting in 1954, participating in most of the country's major battles from the Sinai Campaign to the Yom Kippur War, and shooting down 7 enemy planes over his career. Following his discharge from the army, Peker served as Israel's Consul General in Los Angeles before embarking on a late career in education and private business. Prime Minister Netanyahu expressed deep sorrow over Peker's death, describing him as a genuine Israeli patriot. President Reuven Rivlin saluted Peker as a flight legend, a guardian of the state of Israel, and a brave combatant. The bodies of 3 Hamas operatives were discovered this morning inside a cross-border tunnel that collapsed last week after it was flooded by the Egyptian military. Palestinian rescue workers had been searching for the 3 since last week. Searches for a 4th operative are still ongoing. In the Palestinian Authority, Fatah has concluded its 7th Congress after re-electing President Mahmoud Abbas as its leader and ejecting his rival Mohammed Dahlan from the party. Jailed terrorist Marwan Barghouti won the most votes in the poll for the 18-member Central Committee, followed by Palestinian Football Association head Jibril Rajoub. The Congress, the first since 2009, also elected members for the 80-person Revolutionary Council. Casting his ballot, Abbas called the vote democratic and transparent. Turning abroad to Europe, which is expecting political shake-up in Italy, where Prime Minister Matteo Renzi is on course to lose a referendum on constitutional change. Populist parties are campaigning for a no vote, and the Prime Minister has promised to resign if he loses. The reform focuses on cutting the power and size of the Italian Senate in a bid to streamline lawmaking. A no vote would be a boost for the anti-establishment 5 Star movement, which is leading that no campaign and wants a further referendum on Italy's membership of the euro. Voting closes later tonight and results are expected tomorrow. Meanwhile, in Austria, the leader of the Jewish community has taken the unprecedented step of endorsing a candidate in the presidential election amid fears that far-right Freedom Party leader Norbert Hofer could secure the presidency. Today's vote is a rerun of last May's presidential election, which the Austrian High Court ordered be conducted again owing to counting irregularities. Oskar Deutsch, president of the Jewish Communities of Austria, described former Green Party leader Alexander Van der Bellen, who won May's election by only 31,000 votes, as the better candidate and a friend of the Jewish community and Israel for many decades. Polls suggest again that the vote is too close to call. The contest itself represents an upheaval in Austrian politics, with neither of Austria's main centrist parties reaching the runoff. Ahead of voting, an 89-year-old Austrian Holocaust survivor, whose entire family was killed in Auschwitz, issued this warning about the dangers of extremist politics.
Die Beleidigung anderen gegenüber, das Runtermachen, das Schlechtmachen, das stört mich am allermeisten. Keine Achtung vor den anderen, das Niedrigste aus dem Volk, aus den Leuten herausholen. Nicht das Anständige, sondern das Niedrigste. Und das war schon einmal der Fall.
The iron gate stolen from the former Nazi concentration camp of Dachau in 2014 may have been found in Norway after an anonymous tip-off to police. German police are confident that the gate, with the slogan "Arbeit macht frei," work sets you free, found in the open in western Norway, is indeed the 100-kilogram original, which disappeared from the Bavarian camp 2 years ago. Police in Bergen now hope to return the gate to their German counterparts as soon as possible. The Dachau concentration camp, opened in 1933 originally for political prisoners, was the site of the murder of tens of thousands before the American liberation in 1945. The British government has pledged over £13 million to protect synagogues and Jewish schools in the UK, pledging to put in place the strongest possible measures to ensure the safety of the Jewish community. Speaking at a Jewish news conference, Home Secretary Amber Rudd warned that extremist groups are getting better at harnessing social media to propagate their messages and recruit new members.
And sadly, the Jewish community knows all too well what it's like to live with the threat from terrorism and crime. Last year, the Community Security Trust received 924 reports of anti-Semitic incidents, including 86 violent assaults. Let me be clear, any attack of that kind is one attack too many.
Despite previous reports, there is still no official end to the ongoing labour dispute between Israel's national airline carrier El Al and its workers. Talks between Histadrut Labour Federation head Avi Nissenkorn and representatives of both management and employees resumed last night and continued throughout the day in a further attempt to advance understandings reached in previous meetings. Disruptions on El Al flights are continuing, and the company today once again used leased planes for several of its flights. Over 1,000 farmers demonstrated today in the north to protest the government's decision not to include a planned reform on agriculture subsidies in the upcoming 2-year budget. The farmers took to the streets of northern cities, also blocking main intersections from Kiryat Shmona in the north all the way down to the Arava. The farmers further lashed out at the government's recent decision to allow imports of fresh produce in an effort to lower the cost of living, claiming that this was a direct attack on their livelihoods. The project to build the Red Dead Sea Canal is one step closer to implementation after Jordan announced $400 million in funding from donor countries and agencies towards the first phase. The joint Israeli-Jordanian-Palestinian initiative will provide desalinated water for communities on both sides of the Arava, channeling brine into the Dead Sea to replenish the shrinking lake. Jordan has chosen 5 international consortiums to execute Stage 1, which should transport 300 million cubic meters of water to the Dead Sea annually by 2020 at an estimated cost of $1.1 billion and a planned start date in early 2018. The United States has lodged a protest with Israel over planned legislation to allow free television channels to be broadcast online. Writing to the Prime Minister, who is also the Communications Minister, several US lawmakers expressed concern that the retransmission bill would allow popular syndicated shows, like Friends, to be shown online for free anywhere in the world without proper licensing or royalties, leading to major intellectual property violations. The bill is being debated in the Knesset Economic Affairs Committee, where Chairman Eitan Kabel of the Zionist Union says he intends to hold a vote as planned and to keep it tied to the government's Economic Arrangements Bill, but sources close to him told the Jerusalem Post that the bill has already been softened to take care of 80% of the American concerns. Well, as we kick off a new week, here are 5 good news stories to warm up these wintry days. 2 Israeli Arab timber suppliers have offered to donate wood to refurbish a conservative synagogue in Haifa, ravaged in last month's fires, even offering to cover the labor costs. Ben Gurion University is joining forces with PayPal for research and development in big data, machine learning and cybersecurity. A new Twitter bot will now automatically expose neo-Nazis who impersonate Jews on Twitter every time they tweet. The Imposter Buster was built by Tablet Magazine's Yair Rosenberg and developer Neil Chandra. The Finance Ministry is launching a savings program for children, depositing 50 shekels a month into savings accounts under the child's name, which parents can then supplement with an additional 50 shekels from the government child allowance. And following major rainstorms over the weekend, water levels in the Kinneret have risen by 5 centimetres. In finance, currency markets are still closed for the weekend, and the stock exchange is starting the week down. In weather, after an especially rainy weekend, tomorrow should remain partly cloudy, with fair and seasonal temperatures dropping slightly on Tuesday. And that's all for today. We'll be back again tomorrow with all the latest, leaving you now with the Chermon ski site, which opened its gates to visitors today after experiencing its first layer of snow this season. It's a good evening, and Shavua Tov live from Jerusalem.